Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mystery Read Reads. This is my disclaimer. This beta read in concrete is at the author's request. This video is for learning purposes. Today we're doing a beta read in concrete of a piece of fan fiction. We are revisiting today Unbreakable Bonds for the Great Wicked, and today we're looking at Chapter 2. Previously, I did a beta read in concrete of Chapter 1, and this is in the Star Wars fandom, and so it's beautifully written. And in chapter one, we are introduced to Cressida and Solon, and I believe we're in Solon's point of view. I cannot recall. I think it's Solon's. Yeah, I think it is. Okay, maybe. I don't know if we switched a couple times. Anyway, here's what you need to know. I'm going to give you a quick recap, and I'm going to put a link to my read and crit and a link to Unbreakable Bonds in the description below in case you want to read it, or in case you want to watch the review of Chapter 1. But here's what you need to know as we dive into Chapter 2 is that Obi-Wan has met a boy while Obi-Wan was on his way to a Jedi Council meeting, and he meets this boy, and he's talking to this boy. And it turns out at the end in the meeting, the boy turns out to be Obi-Wan's son that he didn't know about, and Cressida is his mother, and so that's kind of where we're left at the end of Chapter 1. And so we're going to find out what happens after, this revelation. So I'm going to take a deep breath, and we are going to dive in here, and let's see. So Unbreakable Bonds by the Great Wicked, Chapter 2. Our little summary. Following the revelation of Obi-Wan Kenobi's unexpected son, the Jedi High Council faces a whirlwind of inquiries to comprehend the situation's intricacies. The accomplished negotiator, Obi-Wan, is a father, and the child's mother, a Jedi with a history intertwined with Obi-Wan, has resurfaced. Questions abound. What has she been doing all these years? Why was their shared child a secret? Who is Cressida Vox, and what hidden knowledge does this sentinel hold? In search of answers, Masters Mace, Windu, Yoda, and Obi-Wan turn to the Council of First Knowledge. Meanwhile, Solon, Obi-Wan's son, grapples with the truth of his father's identity and his place at the temple. Oh my goodness. I'm like a childhood Star Wars movie watcher, and I watched what is it? Is it The Phantom Menace? Kind of the series where Natalie Portman's in there as Amidala. I watched those, but it's been a long time, and I haven't watched any of the other series or anything like that, or any of the movies that came after it. But I am in the know enough of Obi-Wan and Anakin that we can follow along here. So let's see. Notes. Thank you to my first comment. Few quick notes. I am playing with the timelines just a little bit, so if something doesn't completely line up, just go with it. Number 2, few quick references for name pronunciation. Solon Kyle, I guess I'm saying that right. Looks like it to me. Diva Relu. Oh, it's Deva Ru. Okay, you sort of roll the R into the L. Don't stress. Ru is fine. Ru. We're going to go with Rue. That way we can keep going. Thank you to Mystery Read Reads for reading my content and being so kind with your critiques and praise. Go check out her channel. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're going to scroll down here. I always love her visuals. So neat. I never did these for my fan fiction, but lots of people who post on Wattpad did them, and it's really nice to see them here. I don't even know how, I could probably try to make something, but offhand, I don't know how. I just glazed by Canva myself to make my screens, my opening screens. But then I think I had someone who enjoyed making them, who made one for one of my fics once, and it was okay. It wasn't as good as these. I'm wondering, to the Great Wicked, question to you: do you make these yourself, or is there like what I experienced? Someone volunteered to make one for me because they liked my story. So, but I also don't know how to post them into AO3. For a while, I had one story posted on Wattpad, and it was so tedious to upload it that I just did not upload my other 50 stories. I was like, I'm done with this. And I think eventually I even took that story down from Wattpad because I was just so frustrated with it as a platform. But I don't even know how we do this here. And then, like, over on fanfic.net, it's been a while since I don't even use that one anymore either, but I was starting to learn how to put like page breaks. You could have these beautiful little lines you could put in. They were very thin, but it was like like a break. If you had like a point of view switch mid chapter or something, you could put a break in. Or if you were changing scene or moving something like that, passing time, and you wanted to show it on the same chapter, you could have these little lines you could put in. And I can't remember how to do that either. All these lovely little things that I don't know. There's not like an instruction manual for I don't know, some. I'm wondering now. I'm curious if there's like things that I should be reading and learning how to do this stuff, and I'm just not. Oh my, that might mean I'm a little bit lazy somehow. We won't talk about that part. Okay, if I can get my voice together, we're gonna dive into this read. Okay, here we go. The residual shock followed the five masters. Masters Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan, and Yoda as they adjourned to a smaller antechamber for further discussion. The transition from one space to the next was like stepping into a pocket of calm compared to the confounding whirlwind of commotion that had just been unleashed. There was no yelling, no indication that any hint of displeasure, frustration, or vexation was present. They spoke in inquisitive and investigative tones, devoid of accusation or condemnation. There was only a story to be heard, questions to answer, and a course of action to be determined. I'm going to pause. There's nothing wrong. I just want to point something out. And I'm going to point it out using this. And Star Wars is an excellent fandom to point this out in. So here we have indication, displeasure, frustration, vexation, inquisitive, investigative, devoid, accusation, condemnation. These are some really, I'm not going to say they're not big words, but they're bigger words than you typically use in everyday speech. When it works completely fine here in this story because of how they speak and how the Jedi are formal, and they're kind of thought out when they speak. It's formal, but I feel like they take their time a little bit when they're speaking, almost like they've thought out things, and they're very calm, and so it fits the aesthetic of the story, and therefore it works. I know that sometimes I talk about, like I mentioned in another video, where I typically write for young adults. And so when I do that, I try to keep my audience in mind when I'm writing a piece. So the Star Wars fandom being sci-fi, they tend to lean towards, I'm going to say these more, I don't know, I don't want to, how would I explain, like a higher IQ? I don't know. They're like brilliant, deeply, they come off as very intelligent people who these words roll off their tongue very simply. And so it doesn't bother that reader. Now, I'm going to say, and just throw this into the mix, I have a pretty decent vocabulary. It's decent. And it's probably because I read a lot as a child, constantly. I consumed books like it was nothing. And a lot of what I've learned is from book consumption, okay? One of the things that puts me off of a book is when I pick it up and the preface could sound wonderful, and I pick it up and I'm ready to read it. And I start reading and I'm in one paragraph or the first sentence or by the second paragraph, and I'm seeing giant words that I need to go look up in a book, or look up in a dictionary, or look up, I mean, now we have, Google, whatever. We look it up online to find out what it means. When I'm reading my piece or a book, I want to just read through it and enjoy it, and I don't want to have to go look up everything and what it means. So when I'm writing, even if it's something with a lot of deep thought or intricate, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, I don't want to use this word. I want to use this word that means the same thing because I want to appeal to a broader audience. I don't want someone to pick up my book and then put it down because they didn't understand the words or they couldn't read the words. And the same way, when I read, like I want to read fantasy. I love elves and dwarves and ogres and shoot, I aliens and you can throw it all at me. Okay, I love it all. Anthropomorphs, I don't care. I love it all. So what would put me off of a fantasy book and why I've never actually read one is because then you have this whole map and you have this whole world, and I have to remember this entire world in order to read the story. And sometimes it's great if you want an adventure, but if on top of having to refer back to the map, which I have read a couple books where I referred back to a map, not necessarily, I think it was like I feel like that was more paranormal fiction, but it had it had another world to it. I don't know if anybody ever read I feel like it's the Beautiful Creatures series. I feel like I read that, and I think there was mention of a library, and maybe either there was a map or I wanted there to be a map. But I'm thinking of another story too now that it did eventually have a map, and I did refer to it. A couple of them I read last summer, but the wording in the stories were still simple and easy to read, so I didn't mind referring back to a map so that I knew where my characters were and what world they were working in. It can also be a distraction to have really elaborate names. All that said, none of that I'm not suggesting any changes in this situation at all. This is reading beautifully, and we're going to continue, but I'm saying all that because it reminds me that these are things to consider. When you're writing in the Star Wars fandom, she's using what is very, very familiar and very expected language for this fandom. So there's nothing wrong here. Everything's great. Those are just thoughts I want to share in case they have any meaning to anyone who's listening. So with that, we are going to dive back in here. Now, I will say on this first sentence, like I say when we look for balance in our adjectives, these are descriptions of feelings and sensations that would, radiate energy from one person to another. You could probably do with just, I would say, 2 of these and let one go so that it's not over the top. There was no yelling, no indication that any hint of displeasure or vexation was present. And vexing and frustrating could be similar. So, also, if you drop one and you might need the word later on in the chapter, you won't have already used it, so you won't have an echo. But that's just a single thought. It is great the way it is, but there's a little hint. Like I said, I mentioned in another video, if we start having 2 and 3 commas between descriptors, we're probably going a little too far in our description. So that it's just a thought to consider. It's a whole lot of information first off. So early, I'm just letting it all flow. All my musings just flow out. So, okay, here we go. At the center of it all, looking as though the wind had been knocked out of him, was Obi-Wan. I bet he was. I've got this little thrill when I was reading the first chapter. It was I had this thrill come through me, and it just kind of built as I read through the chapter. It reads beautifully, and I was definitely getting like, oh my gosh, this boy is his boy. I just kind of knew it, and then at the end, it comes to fruition, and now we're gonna find out what Obi-Wan thinks. If I could stop having this little thrill run through me while I'm trying to read. Okay. He stared blankly at no particular point on the floor, his eyes distant and unfocused, like an offline protocol droid. Oh, I like that. He didn't join in the discussion, instead slouching on an accommodating chair, his normally immaculate hair now disheveled and falling in limp strands around his face. The pristine robes that usually draped perfectly around him hung loosely, as if he couldn't be bothered to fix them. All traces of his usual charm and composure were gone, replaced by a portrait of a man grappling with an impossible truth. He had fathered a son. It all felt so surreal, as though he were watching a scene unfold in a holodrama. He never much cared for those blasted things. There in that little pocket of the room, nothing reached him. Even the deep baritone of Mace Windu's voice failed to penetrate the barrier of Obi-Wan's disassociative introspection. Next to Mace stood Master Plo Koon, arms crossed over his chest contemplatively. I'm wondering about... I get what you're saying, but I'm wondering if in contemplation, perhaps? I'm not sure about this. I don't think I've ever seen that word used. I'm wondering about it. I might say in contemplation. I bet if I'm going to test it out. I'm just going to reread this and test it out and see if it rolls off the tongue a little smoother. Hang on. Okay. There, in that little pocket of the room, nothing reached him. Even the deep baritone of Mace Windu's voice failed to penetrate the barrier of Obi-Wan's disassociative introspection. Next to Mace stood Master Plo Koon, arms crossed over his chest in contemplation. He listened more than he spoke, but that was often his way, a steadfast anchor to keep those around him centered. It was difficult to read Master Plo's expression due to his breathing apparatus, but the tightness in his posture suggested he was carrying thoughts that went far beyond the current discourse, thoughts which he didn't share. With a subtle shift in stance, Plo Koon looked to his left, where Anakin positioned himself, standing between his fellow masters and Obi-Wan, almost as though he were a living barrier. Anakin's eyes flickered back and forth between the discussion, and Obi-Wan poised as if ready to defend his master, a detail not lost on Master Yoda. His wrinkled eyes looked on his fellow Jedi, watching and listening, his ears twitching occasionally with interest. He remained quiet, his silence not diminishing his presence. It was his nature to not speak until he had something to contribute. All around Obi-Wan the words filled the air, but they were lost to him, just a jumble of noise and syllables, a language he couldn't comprehend that blended into a symphony of discordant notes, which only added to the ringing in his ears. Yes, he heard the sound of those around him, but they seemed distant and muffled, their concerns and queries drowned out by the steadily growing tinnitus that had held Obi-Wan captive. I'm going to pause. This is reading so beautifully. It's just beautiful. There's like an elegance to your writing. You've mastered the play of description. I can envision Yoda. It's just beautiful. It's just playing out in my head like a scene. You've got sound and texture and this perfect blend. We've got subtlety. We've got his wrinkled eyes looked on his fellow Jedi, watching and listening. We can all see Yoda doing that. His ears twitching occasionally with interest. He remained quiet, his silence not diminishing his presence. So he's a presence in the room. It was his nature to not speak until he had something to contribute. Just absolutely stunning. All around Obi-Wan, their words filled the air, but they were lost to him, just a jumble of noise and syllables. And so I can completely be in Obi-Wan's space and feel this scene playing out around him, and that surrealness is just, it's all there. And it's brought there by the way you have pieced your words together with subtle description, sound. It's just, and the sensation inside, like you've got Obi-Wan's tinnitus. I mean, beautiful. You've got that sound in his ears of like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I've got feels. Yes. Okay, we're going to keep going. Before he could stop them, memories flooded his mind unbidden, taking him back to the last time he looked into those mist-hued eyes, back to the chambers that had borne witness to their whispered disclosures and fevered kisses, where tentative touches turned urgent, all of it unfolded before him, as fresh to him in that moment as they had been over 10 years ago. He could almost feel the warmth of her lips against his, the ardency of her touch inscribing stories onto his body that only they would ever know. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. His fingers tightened against the coarse fabric of his robe, clinging onto something solid as he fought to stay afloat in the maelstrom of his thoughts and memories. The walls of the small chamber seemed to pulse with the voices of the past and the present, the air vibrating with the power of unseen currents. The ringing in Obi-Wan's ears crescendoed, rising up like the whine of a starship's engine pushing beyond its limits. The magnitude of the recollection swelled within him, threatening to sweep away his connection to the here and now under the surge of what had been. The tinnitus grew louder. The voices followed suit until they were deafening, and it felt as though he had been about to tip over an unseen precipice into oblivion. Then it all stopped, and a voice broke through. Obi-Wan quickly snapped out of his hellish reverie, looking up at the twin pools of worry that filled Anakin's eyes. "Obi-Wan?" Anakin asked, gripping his former master's shoulder. "Are you all right, old friend?" The room was silent. The chamber came back into focus, the stoic faces of Masters Mace Windu, Plo Koon, Anakin, and Yoda sharpening from the blur they had become. He swallowed hard somehow in the last few moments. This throat had become as dry as Tatooine's many deserts. Did we mean his throat? Right there. Also, everything is reading beautifully, and I did note tinnitus being on there the second time, but I think it's okay because of the way it's used. We're going to leave it. His chest expanded with a deep inhalation, focusing on filling his lungs as much as he could. With each inhale and exhale, he left a bit more calm, more himself. Finally, he was able to meet the eyes of his peers, who looked on with apprehension. "Apologies," he murmured. "Your question, Master Windu?" His companions exchanged anxious glances, their uncertainty written on their faces. "How is it that you are acquainted with the Sentinel?" "Yes, that." His fingers twitched, perhaps out of nervousness or stress, he wasn't sure, but regardless of the source, he offered a nod and he began to speak. "I knew Cressida years ago. We were Padawans together. Our paths crossed at an early age due to the close friendship between our masters." Never once had Obi-Wan uttered the name Cressida Vox. The name almost stuck in his throat. Before he could elaborate, Plo Koon spoke up. "Deva Relu." Gonna pause. Is Cressida supposed to have two S's here? I feel like it's been Cressida this way. What do I have in my notes? I feel like it's been two S's the whole time. So maybe this is, or else is this written this way on purpose? I am unsure because it's in italics. And then I'm trying to refresh my memory as to how I was appropriately to pronounce was it Deva? We're going to back up. It was Deva. Ooh, good job me. And we're going to go with Rue. Deva Rue. So, okay. Relu. Did I say it right? Deva Relu. We're gonna pretend I did, and the Great Wicked's gonna let me know later. Okay. Whatever discomfort lingered on the shoulders of the Keldor master quickly fell away with the utterance. Although his face was obscured by the mask and goggles he needed to survive, there was no mistaking the melancholy in his voice. Mace wore a look of ambivalence and discomfort. Yoda looked to the ground, almost recoiling. Anakin looked on, baffled, yet another name that meant nothing to him, but all of the others seemed familiar with it. I'm pausing for a second. So he's saying he never is okay. So is this like her? Do they get second names or renamed? Do they like become a Sentinel and are given a name, or is this her real name? I'm now confused. I'm not confused. I'm curious about her name. And he's saying never once had he uttered her name. I could be wrong, but I just don't see Obi-Wan having casual sex. I just don't. I see him being deeply involved with someone. I could be wrong, but that's just my take on it. I don't see him doing that. So for him to never have uttered this version of her name, I'm wondering if this is her real name or was her first, and I don't mean like first name like in your first name and last name. I mean like her original given name before she was a Sentinel. I'm wondering how that works. Either that or has she changed her identity? I'm wondering about her past. So many questions come up in these little pockets right here. So we're going to keep right on going. Okay, where were we? "The smuggler's moon," Mace asked apprehensively. Yoda and Plo Koon shared a heavy nod and both looked uncomfortable. Confusion continued to swirl around Anakin like a flock of frantic porgs, noisy and disorienting. A question was forming on his lips, but a tentative wave of Master Plo Koon's hand stilled any inquiries. Why did I stammer over that? Let's just look for a second. A question was forming on his lips, but a tentative wave of Master Plo Koon's hand stilled any inquiries. It could have just been me. Um, could we have needed an apostrophe here? And maybe I would have read it correctly. I'm not 100% sure. It could have been apostrophe S to his hand because it's his hand. And then I might have read it correctly. Maybe. I will not know because now I know what it says. I'll let you muse over that. His curiosities would have to wait. The room fell silent again, and all eyes turned to Obi-Wan, waiting for the revelations that would bridge the gaps in their understanding. He spoke softly, his gaze still fixed on a distant point once again. He seemed to be looking into the haze of the past. I first met Cressida when she was 10 and I was 16. She had passed the initiate trials with remarkable ease and was chosen almost immediately. Not only was she bright, but exceptionally gifted. As I recall, several masters had expressed interest in training her. Plo Koon shifted slightly and offered the tiniest nod. A hint of smile formed on the corners of Obi-Wan's mouth. She could be a bit of a brat about it at times. I remember she used to. The memory almost drew out a laugh, but he quickly cleared his throat, the gravity of the situation pulling him back. This wasn't the time for amusing anecdotes. It was a rocky start between us, largely because Cressida had quite the ego for one so young, and I was rather defensive and a bit insecure, I suppose. We didn't become friends immediately. However, over time we learned from one another and eventually formed a friendship as close as that of our masters. Although our paths didn't cross frequently, we kept in touch through regular correspondence when we could manage. Whenever circumstances permitted, we would share stories and hard-learned lessons over a meal and drinks. His voice gained a reflective quality, the fleeting memories of camaraderie and youthful optimism fading into something more somber. Our paths naturally diverged as we grew, and we saw each other even less frequently. Our ever-shifting responsibilities led us in different directions, causing our once close bond to slowly fade. Then everything changed when her master died. I'm pausing not because of anything. I'm kind of soaking this in. So I'm kind of imagining them having drinks. He's thinking back into the past. But he's remembering he's kind of in a spot right now. Okay. And now her master died and something's changed. So their paths kind of just went off and, okay. I'm just kind of marinating on all of it. It's so beautifully written. Okay. Obi-Wan tightly closed and then loosened his fists. A foreign edge to his voice revealed his uneasiness. There was more behind Cressida's master's death, but whatever it was that troubled Obi-Wan, he did not expand upon it. I didn't see her again until she was 19 and I was 25, shortly after Master Qui-Gon's death. Anakin's attention was immediately captured when Master Qui-Gon Jinn was mentioned. Obi-Wan rarely spoke about this chaotic time in his life, but Anakin didn't remember much either. I'm going to pause for a second. I kind of feel like we're in Obi-Wan's point of view, but there was something back here that kind of made me think, question it. It made me question it, and I kept going because it's reading so well that I wanted to keep going. But I also try to, when a thought pops through my head, I try to share it with you in case it's relevant or helpful. And I had a question, a point of view, and I'm trying to go back to the spot where I had it. Now I'm kicking myself for not stopping when the question popped up. Here we go. I don't know why this. Well, I guess we could look at it and think about it for a second. Obi-Wan tightly closed and then loosened his fists. We're in Obi-Wan's point of view. A foreign edge to his voice revealed his uneasiness. There was more behind Cressida's master's death, but whatever it was that troubled Obi-Wan, he did not expand upon it. I think because this is my thoughts. I think because we're saying whatever it was that troubled Obi-Wan, he did not expand upon it. And that makes me feel like someone is observing him rather than being with him. Because when we're in Obi-Wan's point of view, let's just try this for a second. If he was to say, there was more behind Cressida's master's death, but whatever it was, I don't think he can muse whatever it was. Unless he doesn't know well, because it says he did not expand upon it. I was thinking whatever it was that troubled him, and I might have even said him instead of Obi-Wan again in this case. Yeah, I think I would have said him again, and that would have helped me stay in his point of view. Otherwise, it seems like he's looking at himself, if that makes any sense. But the other part was that it's also what it says. Whatever it was that troubled him, he did not expand upon it. So I'm wondering, does Obi-Wan know that? Does he know what happened to Cressida's master? Because, okay, when he says he did not expand upon it, I guess he's not allowing his thoughts to go that way. But when I first read it, I thought of it like he was talking to someone, but he's not. He's not, he's not. I guess he is. He is talking about it, but I think it it was initially interpreted as he didn't expand upon it to someone else, and that he had the information about Cressida's master's death. So my question is, if does Obi-Wan know what happened to Cressida's master? If that is the case, I think I would be secure in my point of view if it read a little bit differently. There was more behind Cressida's master's death, but Obi-Wan would not. You have the beautiful words for the way they speak in Star Wars. There was more behind Cressida's master's death, but whatever it was, if he doesn't, if he knows, I'd say that he did not linger upon it, perhaps. There was more behind Cressida's master's death, but he would not linger upon those thoughts and those memories now. Something to that accord, and that would be still very tightly in Obi-Wan's point of view. And I'm not saying this sentence isn't. I'm saying when I first read it, it made me wonder and ask questions, and part of it is because of what's actually in it. I wondered, did Obi-Wan know what happened to Cressida's master? And then I wondered if we were in someone else's point of view, because it was as though they were looking at Obi-Wan and talking to him the way I read it, or my brain interpreted it, and that he did not expand upon it. So if he knows and he's not allowing himself to think about it, then make that very clear. And if he doesn't know, he's not going to muse over the possibilities. Something to that degree. Separating the two very clearly, because they have two different meanings. And both of those thoughts, in the two different ways, whichever one applies to the situation, will keep us tightly with Obi-Wan. I hope all of that makes sense, and I'm going to move on. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. But I think it was pretty clear the way I broke it down. But I'm never sure. I'm never sure if I've conveyed it enough, and so I don't want to go on and on. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I've given everything I can for you to understand. All right, we're gonna move on. I didn't see her again until she was 19 and I was 25, shortly after Master Keegon's death. Is it Keegon? Like, am I saying it right? Is it Key or is it Chi? We're gonna go with Key. If I'm wrong, was that pronunciation up at the top? Okay, I don't want to lose my spot. How can I mark my spot? And we're gonna see if it holds my highlight. Was Key? I don't think his is in there. We have Kyle. We have Deva LaRue. I don't think we do. If I'm saying it wrong, I do apologize. We're going to keep going. Anakin's attention was immediately captured when Master Keegon Jinn was mentioned. Obi-Wan rarely spoke about this chaotic time in his life, and Anakin didn't remember much either. I was devastated by his loss, he continued. Speaking of the memory seemed to physically pull him down. His head bowed and his shoulders falling. The events of Naboo were still as fresh in his mind as they had been well over a decade ago. Anakin was about to become my Padawan. The suddenness of that responsibility left me feeling more overwhelmed and unprepared than I had ever been. He paused, closing his eyes briefly. Needless to say, I wasn't handling it all well. There was a wave of discomfort over the masters, the ghostly tendrils of guilt, perhaps. Obi-Wan had been 25 when he took Anakin as his Padawan, after advocating passionately to fulfill his master's dying request. It had been a responsibility the Council at the time had been hesitant to allow, but while Qui-Gon had commanded a great deal of respect, He most certainly had a way of ruffling feathers, a trait which had been passed on to Obi-Wan. Perhaps it was the quality and determined spirit that convinced them to permit Obi-Wan to train Anakin, but still, 25 had been quite young to have a Padawan. She was the first person to make me smile since Naboo. I hadn't been able to bring myself to eat for days, but with a bit of prodding, I was able to pull myself together, and before the night was out, she had me laughing like it was old times again. He blew out a little breath from his nose, a half breath, a half laugh. It was just catching up in the beginning. We had both changed so much. He smiled at the ground as the warmth of a recollection settled over him, one he wouldn't stifle. After some back and forth, she confided in me that she had been chosen for a clandestine mission, one that would take her to distant worlds, and she believed our paths would never cross again. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm wondering if part of the clandestine mission was a change of her name, and I'm wondering that. Okay. He let out a defeated breath. Her departure was imminent. A veil of vulnerability fell over Obi-Wan. Having just lost my master, I feared losing another friend so quickly, and so she was preparing to leave. As she was preparing to leave, I pleaded with her to stay a while longer. It was wrong, and I shouldn't have, but she stayed with me, and before too long our conversations became more intimate. Obi-Wan had long held such a strict and rigid position in the code of the Jedi. It seemed so out of character for him to make such a decision, but it wasn't unrealistic. Pain was often the harbinger of recklessness. It was a fleeting moment, but one we both rationalized and seeking comfort amidst our looming responsibilities. We shared the night. He paused and swallowed, straightening his shoulders once more and clearing his throat. When I woke up in the morning, she was gone. 3 of the Jedi Masters in the room had known Obi-Wan since he was a youngling. They had seen him grow and conquer great feats, train his own Padawan who had saved the Jedi Order and prevented a galactic disaster. Yet despite those years of knowledge and trust in the presence of those who knew him best, it felt as though perhaps they didn't know him as well as they thought. A few long moments of silence punctuated the room. What else was there to say? Nothing about what Obi-Wan had explained was terribly shocking or scandalous. Where else could a child have come from? It all just spilled out as if he were confessing to a crime or some great wrongdoing that he ought to have been ashamed of, and it didn't sit right with Anakin. While it was true that the Jedi were known for their long-standing prohibition of attachments, physical relationships were not forbidden, though many chose to embrace celibacy of their own accord. However, not all of them did. In fact, there had been many instances of Jedi having children with Jedi partners as well as non-Jedi partners. I don't remember any of this. Anakin's face was a portrait of complete bewilderment. Not surprising, Obi-Wan shrugged, clearing his throat. At the time, you were placed under the care of Master Adi Gallia while I prepared to be your master and gathered myself. Your training began the day after Master Keegon's pyre. Obi-Wan. The tone in Mace's voice was hesitant, and even he seemed like he didn't want to ask the question he knew he had to. Is there a possibility that Cressida engineered the pregnancy, manipulated you for her own purposes? Obi-Wan's eyes widened in genuine shock, and he visibly pulled back, vehemently shaking his head. No one looked particularly happy at the inquiry, but as council members, they bit their collective tongues, understanding that he had to seek truth, even if it led to uncomfortable questions. Now, I'm going to stop for a second, because in the back of my mind, when she lost her master, and he too is rocked by this, and then he's also getting ready to become this mentor, there's a lot of emotions attached to all of that. So this all is very believable. This is very beautifully written, and the build is gradual and it's completely realistic. It's just wonderful. I'm just kind of it's very, very, very good. So I'm not thinking for a second as he asks Obi-Wan this question. I'm not for a second thinking that Cressida did that. It never even crossed my mind because of the build between them, because they knew each other. They encountered this grief, inducing event. He's going through a major life change. She's about to go on a major life change, and she doesn't think she's ever going to see him again. And so they share this night together, and it's very beautiful and very believable. And I don't think for a second that she did that on purpose. I mean, that wouldn't even cross my mind. given all of the circumstances surrounding the event. So, anyway, we're going to keep going. No, I know Cressida. She would never manipulate me in such a way. Mace pursed his lips, taking a moment to choose his words carefully. Are you certain? Simple questions often required simple answers, but nothing about this situation was simple. Perhaps she sought to find her way out of her assignment? Despite the careful wording, Mace's true inquiry was hard to conceal. Did Cressida manipulate Obi-Wan in order to avoid her assignment? Absolutely not. Obi-Wan's steadfast answer harbored no hesitation, nor could his certainty be shaken. It may have been 10 years since he had seen Cressida, and there were many secrets waiting to be discovered in light of the day's revelations. However, until he found a reason not to trust one of his oldest friends, he would not allow her name to be slandered. Anakin's face scrunched up in incredulity. He couldn't offer an unbiased opinion, but he didn't need to provide one given Mace's question. It just seems such a far-fetched conclusion to come to. He cleared his throat, attracting the attention of Master Windu and those around him. As the youngest master present, Anakin knew he had to be careful with his words at this moment. Forgive me, Master Windu, he began, addressing the older Jedi, but I find it hard to believe that Cressida would go through the effort of conceiving, carrying, and giving birth to a child just to avoid a dangerous assignment. Furthermore, if that was her intention, why would she wait 10 years before taking action? It doesn't add up. The doubt that had lingered now seemed to wane, but Mace, cautious as ever, wasn't ready to dispel all of his suspicions. Do you believe her, Obi-Wan? Do you believe that Solon is your son? Conviction illuminated Obi-Wan's eyes, and he answered once more without hesitation. Yes, I do. With the admission, the previously heaviness... I'm thinking maybe this is just supposed to be previous. Let's just try it. Yes, I do. With the admission, the previous heaviness that held him seemed to release him, and he rose up as though reclaiming something about himself. I had a brief conversation with Solon outside just before the meeting, and there was an undeniable connection, a resonance I couldn't explain at the time. But now it all falls into place. If Cressida says he is my son, then I believe her. Anakin gave a slight nod of his head and added, He definitely has your nose. Nice, very nice. I love that Anakin can offer that little bit of humor to break all the tension in this situation. I want to clap for you. I just love it. Okay. Obi-Wan's expression remained serious, but he quickly caught the hint of a jest meant to ease the tension, and his lips curved into a small smile. The tension in the room began to ease with a light-hearted joke. Explain it, it does, Yoda interjected. Such a high midi-chlorian count in the boy. Yoda looked at Mace's ears twitching. A blood test we should conduct to confirm what we can. The suggestion was a practical step forward in their quest for answers, and the masters and attending nodded in agreement. I might use attendance in that situation. Let's just try it. The suggestion was a practical step forward in their quest for answers, and the masters and attendants nodded in agreement. Much has been revealed today, a bit of rest and meditation we all should seek. Several heads nodded, and that at the core was the Jedi way. When in doubt, meditate. But a final inquiry must be made, a look of reluctance on his wrinkled face. A romantic attachment was there, Obi-Wan? Anakin fidgeted, holding back the urge to defend his master without even knowing the answer. A more biased opinion couldn't be found on the subject apart from Master Anakin Skywalker's. The best argument he could make felt a bit too juvenile for the assembly present. If I can overcome my attachments, surely my master can too. Yes, a bit too immature response, which was why Anakin said nothing, holding back his impulsive nature and allowing his master to speak for himself. There was an intense physical attraction, Master Yoda, he admitted without shame or hesitation, but it never evolved into a romantic relationship. Our encounter was a singular instance born out of a moment of vulnerability and shared grief. The end of one mystery, yet another loomed. Never did I think such a thing would ever happen, Obi-Wan muttered more to himself than anyone else. Obi-Wan stuttered several times, trying to force the words in his head to conform to words spoken aloud, but it just came out a jumble, and he took several steps toward the doors that led back to the council chamber, the place where his son was waiting. I'm going to pause for just a second. Obi-Wan stuttered several times, trying to force... I might suggest using thoughts here in place of this words, let's just try it and see what you think. Never did I think such a thing would ever happen, Obi-Wan muttered more to himself than anyone else. I just... Obi-Wan stuttered several times, trying to force the thoughts in his head to conform to words spoken aloud, but it just came out a jumble, and he took several steps toward the doors that led back to the council chamber, the place where his son was waiting. So I think that read smoother, but I'm also thinking it's kind of a long sentence, and I think there's a spot where you could make it a period, and then you could do it right here. You could make this a period. You could take out this and make this a capital H. Obi-Wan stuttered several times, trying to force the thoughts in his head to conform to words spoken aloud, but it just came out a jumble. He took several steps toward the doors that led back to the council chamber, the place where his son was waiting. How could I have not known? The door was just a simple door, and another step forward would see it slide open, and on the other side would be a young boy, whom Obi-Wan had sensed was more than he seemed from the moment he laid eyes on him. But he didn't take that step. He couldn't, and he retreated back to his seat, rubbing his face as if he were trying to wake up from an overextended nap. I made this were. I used the word were because it felt softer to me. I don't know, the word felt like it fit into the context a little bit better than was. That's very, very subtle. Very subtle change. One to toy with, see what you think. On this subject, Anakin found himself uniquely in a position to offer a perspective that no other master could. He looked to his right arm and thought of the mechanical workings inside the black leather glove and how this hand would hold his children soon. How it held Padme and wielded a lightsaber to protect his growing family as well as his Jedi family. I didn't know Padme was pregnant, Anakin admitted somewhat sheepishly. Several heads turned to look at Anakin, most expressions a mix of curiosity and bewilderment. The topic of Anakin's indiscretions, as many referred to it, that being his secret marriage to a senator and queen, as well as the family he had kept hidden from the Jedi Order, was something of a sore spot, and not something he discussed often, mostly out of awkward curiosity. They seemed uncertain as to why he brought it up. I'm going to look at this paragraph for just a second. I'm going to go back a little bit. Okay. Several heads turned to look at Anakin, most expressions a mix of curiosity and bewilderment. The topic of Anakin's indiscretions, as many referred to it, that being his secret marriage to a senator and queen, as well as the family he had kept hidden from the Jedi Order, was something of a sore spot, and not something he discussed often. It works. It's a very long sentence. And so I kind of thought it needed to be two sentences, and I was kind of looking for a place to break it. It's long. It's a little bit long. It did read, but it is a little bit long. I would probably take a second look at it if I were you. We could spend some time toying with it, but as I didn't find the spot when I reread it, it's really kind of an opinion. Sometimes you have a long sentence. I don't know. That one I'm going to say I'm not sure, but I did notice it was long as I was reading it. So we're just going to note it and we're going to move on. Mostly out of awkward courtesy. They seemed uncertain as to why he brought it up. It seems relevant to me. I mean, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. It completely makes sense to me why he brought it up. I think it's relevant. I'm with Anakin on this. Okay, anyway. Actually, Anakin came to my mind, and I probably should have said that back when it popped up, that Anakin probably relate to Obi-Wan a little bit in this situation, because I'm over here wondering, it's like a big deal for them to have an attachment or be in a relationship, but at the same time, Anakin's like married, and he's going to have twins, and he's younger than Anakin, and he's more volatile in ways. I would think that would be a pretty huge deal in and of itself. So that's an interesting parallel, and it completely seems relevant. We're going to keep going. Looking at his hand, he could hear the gears and clicks with each flex of his fingers. He was lost in his reverie until Obi-Wan's voice, calling his name, drew him from it. He quickly returned to the present, suddenly remembering he was trying to make a point. Padme was 5 months into her pregnancy when she finally told me about the babies. Throughout our courtship, I was with her as often as I could. I held her at night, and she slept by my side whenever we were able to. Yet I never knew. He looked at his hands, clenching and unclenching, as if trying to imagine them holding such precious things as his children. Excuse me. Throughout our courtship, I was with her as often as I could be. I think we want the word be right before that comma. Yeah. Okay. Throughout our courtship, I was with her as often as I could be. I held her at night, and she slept by my side whenever we were able to. That could even be a period, and you could have a second sentence here so that it's not as long, and it'll be seamless. Yet I never knew. He looked at his hands clenching and unclenching as if trying to imagine them holding such precious things as his children. I've got this really great visual, and I can sense the sensation of, you've got a mechanical arm. You might crush your kids on accident. Probably not, but it could happen. I mean, it's something I can see it cross through his mind. And also, he's not feeling them. Depends on the technology, I suppose, but I'm generally assuming that he does not have sensation in that hand and would not be able to feel them. He's going to hold them and not actually feel them. So that's kind of a thought too. Now the scene is really interesting. The visuals are perfect. I'm getting caught up in it. Okay. How can I not feel the life inside her? Half of her, half of me. The question wasn't for anyone to answer. It seemed it was more of something Anakin was still wrestling with on a personal level. He shook his head in uncertainty. Padme herself didn't know until she was almost 2 months into her pregnancy. He chuckled and looked at Obi-Wan. My friend. I almost want a comma right there, because he's addressing him. My friend. If the mother of my children didn't know, and I didn't know until she told me, the chosen one, how can you ask yourself that same question and expect a different answer? Padme was right next to me. Cressida would have been a half a galaxy away. You mustn't torture yourself with what is impossible to know. His words resonated with the room, and his fellow Jedi seemed both surprised and moved by his insights. But Anakin wasn't quite finished. It's funny. It was like turning on a light. Anakin removed his gloves, snapping his mechanical fingers, but no distinctive snapping sound could be made. Only a sort of grinding metallic shear. I don't know. I'm curious. I'm gonna look up shear. I don't think I've seen that used either. I'm sure you're right, but I'm just gonna look. Let's see. Okay, so it says the definition of sheer is nothing other than unmitigated. Used for emphasis, she giggled with sheer delight. It is also perpendicular or nearly so. So I think we want a different sound. Let's see. Sometimes the word is confused with shear, which is just cutting off the wool on a sheep, so that's not what we want either. Anakin removed his gloves, snapping his mechanical fingers, but no distinctive snapping sound could be made. Only a sort of grinding metallic. I hate to use the word squeak because there is a tone to this story, and the word you want to use has got to be something that fits the overall tone. It's a very distinct voice into this piece. So I would just suggest playing with that sound right there and look for another one that fits the aesthetic of your story. We're going to keep going. Then he switched to the flesh and blood hand that remained, and a sharp, crisp snap was heard. He smirked. As soon as she told me, I couldn't not feel them. He looked at Obi-Wan. Can you feel him now? Obi-Wan closed his eyes, and after a quiet moment, he opened them again. He's scared. And Cressida? Obi-Wan employed the same pensive moment of reaching out through the Force, but came back with nothing. She's hiding, but I sense uncertainty and guilt. I'm sure, Obi-Wan. Had she been able to tell you, she would have. Perhaps it's why you are the only one of us that she wouldn't look at back there. Considering Anakin's words, Obi-Wan realized he was right. Whenever a master spoke or asked a question, Cressida had acknowledged them in some way, even if it was just a small nod of her head. Yet even when she had spoken his name, identifying Obi-Wan as Solin's father, she hadn't looked at him, not once. The amused and bubbly sound of Yoda's chuckle was heard as he meandered over to Anakin. Observant our youngest master is becoming. Great insight rule-breaking has brought him. He gave Anakin's boot a little jab with his walking stick. But an invitation to break more it is not. He admonished humorously, prompting more than a few chuckles. Cute. You got a little bitty gap right there. Obi-Wan nodded in agreement and cracked a smile. It was small and fragile, but it was still a smile. Anakin held out his hands in defeat as Master Yoda's sprightly but formidable presence. He hadn't been whacked with that stick since he was a Padawan. We want a word here. We're missing a he right here. Since he was a Padawan, which really wasn't all that long ago. Let's see. Anakin held out his hands in defeat as Master Yoda's sprightly but formidable presence at Yoda's sprightly but formidable presence. This could probably let me try again. I don't know why I'm struggling. I didn't struggle. I'm like tripping over my words here, and I want to. It gives me pause. Then if I trip over it, I kind of re-examine it to see if there's something that's not working about it. But I think it's actually okay. It may just very well be me, or it might be because there was one little word missing, which is ridiculous. But for me to trip over it over one word. But as I'm reading, I'm kind of also processing. I'm thinking. I'm analyzing. So sometimes I'll slow down, and then I start to question, why am I slowing down? What is tripping me up? Let's just try it again. Obi-Wan nodded in agreement and cracked a smile. It was small and fragile, but it was still a smile. Anakin held out his hands in defeat at Master Yoda's sprightly but formidable presence. He hadn't been whacked with that stick since he was a Padawan, which really wasn't all that long ago. Okay, better. It was possibly just me in that first half, and then I just kind of completely tripped over the last of it with that one little word missing because I was like, oh, I need to tell her. But anyway. As unpredictable as the day had been, nothing could prepare anyone for Mace Windu's next words. Master Skywalker is right. Is it a comma? A comma would be an incomplete thought. Is it a statement? Or is it an incomplete thought? Anyway. Let's think. Okay. As unpredictable as the day had been, nothing could prepare anyone for Mace Windu's next words. Master Skywalker is right. I think we could move this right up here to the end of this, and then because it's kind of alone, it's Mace talking, so I think we could just move this text right up here to the end of this sentence. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, so let's pretend, and I'm going to read it as though it's all together, and as if that's a period and he's just made a statement. Okay. As unpredictable as the day had been, nothing could prepare anyone for Mace Windu's next words. Master Skywalker is right. No head snapped to Master Windu faster than Anakin's, and he looked just as shocked as his mentor, but didn't press his luck with any quick words. That's a long sentence. I read it fine. You could potentially look to make two sentences there. And if you wanted to know where to do it, you could easily do it right here. No head snapped to Master Windu faster than Anakin's. Period. Take out the and, capitalize the H. He looked just as shocked as his mentor. Perhaps a comma, maybe. I personally would tuck one in there, but do not listen to me on commas. Do your own thing. He looked just as shocked as his mentor, but didn't press his luck with any quick words. There we go. This is not a matter that can be resolved in a single day. The story is known, but there are more questions that need to be answered before we come to any conclusion regarding your son. His son. The concept was as new and foreign to him now as it was when it was first uttered in the council chamber. It still didn't feel real, but it was undeniable. He was a father. We will adjourn for the day as we look into this matter further, Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan looked up at Mace, who wore a look of hesitation. For the time being, I believe it is best that you keep your contact with your son and his mother limited. He didn't know what to say. Something inside him felt and let's try. He didn't know what to say. Something inside him that felt instinctual demanded he refuse such a ridiculous notion. Honestly, I'm going to pause for a second. I too am outraged at him asking him to stay away from him. Clearly, this man needs to go talk to her, okay? How? No. Just no. 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 Clearly, he needs to go talk to this woman. How can you tell him stay away from her? No. Just no, sir. I'm so sorry. No, sir. Okay, and then he didn't know what to say. Something inside him that felt instinctual. Here's the thing with this sentence. Part of me was probably tripping over it because I wanted to throw my objection in there to him telling him to stay away. The other part was reading inside him that. So when I often say we write as we speak, okay? So, but in Star Wars, you don't do that. So I tripped over this because my mouth and my brain wanted to read it the way we would have spoken it. He didn't know what to say. Something inside him felt it. See, I kind of wanted to skip the word that and say felt instinctual, but it didn't fit because it's not what the sentence says. And so there's nothing wrong with the sentence, in my opinion, based on the context of the story and the tone and the voice and the setting. Okay. But this is an instance where I would tell you don't do what I usually say, which is where I usually say write it as you would speak it. But in this world that we're working in, I would not advise that. I think that you have said it the way a Jedi would think it and say it. It's kind of like when we do a historical fiction and we go back to how they spoke back then. And Bridgerton pops into my mind, but, and then you have some authors who kind of do a contemporary take on a historical time and they write it like we would speak now, just so that the average viewer can follow along and not be put off by the way they speak. So those are different techniques and that you can toy with depending, and it'll work in your world depending on how you have built it and how you are writing it. She is staying true to her verse, and I'm going to read you this sentence correctly, and we're going to roll on. He didn't know what to say. Something inside him that felt instinctual demanded he refuse such a ridiculous notion. A comma might help. I mean, you could tuck a comma somewhere in there, maybe. I mean, there's one right here. I don't know. There could be a second one. I'm not entirely sure because I'm a mess when it comes to commas. We're going to ignore me and we're going to move on from that. He had just learned of his son. How could he not go to him or speak with his son's mother? It was Anakin's reassuring hand on Obi-Wan's shoulder that stilled any rebuttal and instilled calm. I am going to point this out. So here we've got stilled and then we have instilled. And while it's not directly a word echo, they have similar sounds inside them. And so sometimes that can be, it's not technically wrong, but sometimes I find it to be a break to the rhythm of a story when you have two sounds in the same sentence like that, stilled and instilled. Now, if you did it deliberately, keep it. But I feel a little sense of hesitation inside of me, and I would attribute that to having a resembling sound breaking the rhythm of the story, because there's a cadence to this story, and it did break that for me. So take it for what you will. We could probably play with it and reword it. I don't know. It was Anakin's reassuring hand on Obi-Wan's shoulder that stilled any rebuttal. And I'm trying to think of a beautiful word to instill calm in a different way. I feel like I take too long to come up with my ideas, and honestly, that's kind of what I do when I write. I will sit with a sentence, if I want it to sound a certain way, I will sit with it for quite a while. And so, but I don't, honestly, this is your story, and I can leave it to you to figure that out. I just want to offer a suggestion. I feel like if I point something out, I should offer a resolution to whatever I point out. And so that's why I hesitate. But in a crunch, I'm going to take too long, and we're going to keep going. And I'm going to leave it to you because you have a beautiful voice anyway. So we're just going to keep going. Only until we are able to speak with the Council of First Knowledge. I will reach out immediately. I do not mean to keep you from your son. I'm sure you have many things you wish to know from the boy's mother as well. I only urge caution for the moment until we can verify some information. What does he need to verify? And he might as well just tell him what he needs to verify because it's completely relevant to all the parties involved, okay? You don't tell him to do that. It's just not right. I totally believe he would. I totally believe he would tell him not to do that. I need to control myself. Okay. He didn't like it. Boy, I don't like it either. I am mad on your behalf. He didn't like it. Anyone who could see his expression could tell that. I think you have an extra could. You just need to delete. Let's try it. He didn't like it. Anyone who could see his expression could tell that. But Mace was far from a cruel man. In fact, he had quite the soft spot for children, and anyone could tell he liked the young boy. Not many people held the power to bring about a smile on the stoic face of Master Mace Windu. No, it wasn't out of cold-heartedness, but as Mace had said, caution. Caution from what? Caution from what? We will begin with a blood test, confirm paternity and his midichlorian count. From there, we will all find our way. I think it prudent to keep today's events within our walls until a course of action can be determined. The path forward was clear. They would consult the Council of First Knowledge, the repository of wisdom within the Jedi Order. Although Mace was not the Grand Master of the Order, it was no secret that many expected him to succeed Yoda in the near future. So when Mace set forth the sequence of events to be adhered to, none argued. With the Council's decision to adjourn, the room gradually emptied, the Jedi Council members departing to attend to their duties. I kind of think you could put a period there and make that a separate sentence. Obi-Wan remained seated for a moment longer, his mind racing with questions and emotions, yet anchored by the reality that lay before him. Before he departed, Mace looked over his shoulder. It seems congratulations are in order, Obi-Wan. I think you want a period there. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, and look, there's that beautiful break that I do not know how to do. I will have to get instructions. Where did you learn how to do these? Where did you learn how to do this? Send it to me. I want to know. Okay. Let's see. A little shimmering green glow bug strolled idly along the length of Solon's index finger, examining the soft, fleshy digit it had landed on with what looked like curiosity. Its tiny feet, light as a feather, tickled his skin and brought a lazy smile to his face as he lay on his side on the balcony. I'm going to pause for a second. Okay, I love the visual, but it was kind of long. A little shimmering green glow bug strolled idly along the length of Solon's index finger. I might end the sentence there. He examined the soft, fleshy digit it had landed on with what looked like curiosity. That's my suggestion for that. Its tiny feet, light as a feather, tickled his skin and brought a lazy smile to his face as he lay on his side on the balcony. That is a little bit wordy with the double on. I wonder if we could. Its tiny feet, light as a feather, tickled his skin and brought a lazy smile to his face as he lay on the balcony. I might just say, not specify on his side, just have him laying on the balcony. I can kind of, yeah, I've still got the visual, and I think you could just take that little snippet out and your sentence is going to read tighter, keep your cadence, and you're still going to have the visual. He'd been lying there for some time now, having given up on meditation long ago. However, he and his new little friend seemed to be enjoying one another's company, which was a blessed distraction because Solon was growing restless. It had been 2 full days since the High Council, and Solon himself learned the truth about his paternity. And he hadn't been quite himself. I'm going to pause there too. So we've got himself twice in the same sentence. It had been 2 full days since the High Council and Solon himself learned the truth about his paternity. I would probably just end my sentence right there. You may not need this because you're you're probably going to be able to, and you probably will as we read on, I'm going to find that you're going to actually show this so you don't have to say it. Let's pretend it's not there, and I'm going to read through the paragraph and we're going to carry on, and I'm going to see if we still get the same feel and that you might not need that. It had been 2 full days since the High Council and Solon himself learned the truth about his paternity. But that was to be expected to some degree. Okay, so see, and you might not need that one either. Watch. Here we go. Oh, no, stop doing that. It's been doing that lately. It did not used to do that, and I'm not really sure why. It's probably a new feature in something that they've done. Okay, so I'm going to pretend from here to the end of this period that that's not there. And I'm going to read this. And I think what's going to happen, and I could be wrong because I was just wrong and I had to rethink my suggestion. But I think what's going to happen is you're actually going to be showing this, or you're going to say it again by marking his behavior. Basically, you might not have to say this because you're going to show it. And so it will read better without that. So let's try it. It had been 2 full days since the High Council and Solon himself learned the truth about his paternity. He was more subdued and quieter than usual, but surprisingly composed despite the news. You could even say he was more subdued and quieter than usual, but that was to be expected to some degree. Still, he was surprisingly composed despite the news. There's my suggestion on that one. We're going to keep going. Learning that all the stories he had been led to believe about his father were nothing more than tall tales wouldn't have been easy for anyone. Yet, to his credit, Solon handled the situation with a level of maturity and composure that many adults might not have managed under the best of circumstances. I'm pausing for a second because I don't know that they were tall tales. I feel like some of what I read that Solon had mentioned, I feel like he said some things about Obi-Wan in chapter 1, but without knowing it was Obi-Wan. But I completely thought it was Obi-Wan. So he might be doubting right now, thinking this old man's my dad, and, there's no way these things are true. Maybe that's what he's thinking, but I don't know. Okay, we're going to keep going. All right. Let's see. Did I read the... Okay, we're going to read it again because I had to break in with my thoughts, so sorry. Learning that all the stories he had been led to believe about his father were nothing more than tall tales wouldn't have been easy for anyone. Yet, to his credit, Solon handled the situation with a level of maturity and composure that many adults might not have managed under the best of circumstances. He would have been within his rights as a young child to react with anger, but he held back. It would have been understandable if tears of betrayal streamed down his face, but he remained serene. No one would have judged him for demanding the answers that were rightfully his, but Solon chose a different path. Instead, he observed the events unfold with a sense of detachment as his father was quickly escorted out of the chambers, followed by several other masters. Afterward, he and his mother were ushered to their new quarters, now designated specifically for them. They were certainly much nicer compared to the subterranean home he had always known. This new place was much cleaner, cooler, and blessedly free of sand. He didn't like sand much, hated how it stuck between his toes. Beautiful. If I wouldn't stammer, I stammered over one of the words. Just absolutely beautiful writing. Okay. Despite the beauty and perfection of his surroundings, and he'd wanted nothing more than to explore the grounds, but he knew now wasn't the time to indulge in his curiosities. Okay. So this one read a little bit, it's long, and I think, let's see, let's try it again. Despite the beauty and perfection of his surroundings, I think the and threw me off. Let's pretend it's not there and see what happens. Despite the beauty and perfection of his surroundings, he'd wanted nothing more than to explore the grounds. But he knew now wasn't the time to indulge in his curiosities. Okay, so my mouth is trying to read it as you would speak it, but I think for our Star Wars world that you have it the correct way, if that makes sense. I feel like the logic is there for all of us. I think I don't want the and. I wouldn't want that there when I read it. And he wanted nothing more than to explore the grounds. And I kind of want a period here. Oh, let's play with it a second. Despite the beauty and perfection of his surroundings, he'd wanted nothing more than to explore the grounds. He knew now wasn't the time to indulge his curiosities. I think it's probably okay. Okay, so I want you to put a period there right here, and then I want it to say capital B, but, and I know we're told not to begin sentences with and or but. However, we do speak that way, and I feel like in some instances it's okay. There may be a hard and fast rule. You could look into that. I've seen I've seen both happen. I've seen and but happen. So maybe let's pretend that that is but. Despite the beauty and perfection of his surroundings, he'd wanted nothing more than to explore the grounds. Period. But he knew now wasn't the time to indulge in his curiosities. No, he had to exercise patience and wait. The only other part of the temple he'd seen was during his brief visit to the halls of healing. Yeah, that worked seamlessly. I flowed right into my next paragraph. So yeah, that's my suggestion there. We're going to keep rolling. The only other part of the temple he'd seen was during his brief visit to the halls of healing. There, accompanied by his mother and Master Plo Koon, whom his mother seemed to know, though he wasn't sure how exactly. That sentence seems incomplete. Why is that? The only other part of the temple he'd seen was during his brief visit to the halls of healing. There, they were accompanied by his mother and Master Plo Koon, who his mother seemed to know, though he wasn't sure how exactly. I think we need an there they were accompanied, or yeah, I think, or they'd been accompanied, although we're writing formally in the Star Wars world, so I'm you may want the longer version there. Let's see. The only other part of the temple he'd seen was during his brief visit to the halls of healing. There, they'd been accompanied by his mother and Master Plo Koon, whom his mother seemed to know, though he wasn't sure how exactly. Yeah, that was better. We're missing a word there. A simple finger prick confirmed his paternity, a perfect genetic match, and a midichlorian count of 16,285. Undeniable proof of his connection to the Force and Obi-Wan. They even shared the same blood type. Then 2 whole days of nothing. If word had come to them from the High Council, his mother hadn't shared it with him. Yeah, okay. With no tasks to occupy his time and nowhere to go, all he could do was wait. He had tried to be patient, but being cooped up for 2 nights was getting on his nerves as a 10-year-old boy. But being cooped up for 2 nights was getting on his nerves as a 10-year-old boy. This is going to sound odd, but I kind of want something more formal there. Frustrating for a 10-year-old boy? Let's try that out. He had tried to be patient, but being cooped up for 2 nights was frustrating for a 10-year-old boy. Maybe. Also, it's less words. I think maybe frustrating for a 10-year-old boy. I mean, if you consider this being like one. So I think, yeah, it might be less wordy. I don't know. Okay, we're going to ignore me and keep going. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Coruscant would soon be shrouded in twilight. With its 4 moons, complete darkness was a rare occurrence on the planet, and the abundance of artificial light ensured that true night was virtually impossible. Tonight, 2 of its moons, Centrax 1 and Hesperidium, would be visible in the sky. He'd never seen a moon until they arrived on Coruscant. He could already see them, but he knew that Centrax 1's orbit was shorter and it wouldn't remain visible for long. Did you know what the Shadows dance is? The glowbug skittered to his knuckle and then turned as if it realized Solon was talking to it, and it looked at him. I would tuck this... I kind of wondered who said this. Like, I almost felt like someone had entered the room or something. So I would tuck this up here so that we know that Solon is saying it. Because it's kind of like out here by itself, I thought that someone had maybe, like his mother had maybe walked into the room or something. Also, I'm totally musing over this boy's intelligence. I mean, he's 10 and he's very intelligent. So we're going to keep going. The glow bug skittered to his knuckle and then turned as if it realized Solon was talking to it, and it looked at him. I'll tell you. Solon looked up to the sky and smiled before looking back at the glow bug. It's a special event. It's when all four of Coruscant's moons line up and Coruscant is completely dark. Solon looked out at the light pollution that kept the sky from ever being truly dark. Well, almost, he added. You see, it's a time when the veil between the worlds is the thinnest. Some people say that when it happens, long-lost souls roam the planet whispering secrets to anyone who will listen. People tell stories, meditate, and light candles for their ancestors. And when the sky is still black, the souls need a guiding light back to their place of rest until the next eclipse. That's where you come in. Solon smiled a sad smile, and the tiny bug took a few steps up his finger, now resting on the back of his hand, still looking at Solon as though it understood everything he was saying. Because it's completely dark, the souls need help finding their way back, but artificial light confuses them because it's too bright. So they follow the trail of glow bugs into the ether until the next eclipse. Okay, I read that sentence just fine, but as I was reading it, I noticed that it was long. You could consider looking for a place to find a stop spot for a period and a start of a new sentence, or you could leave it. I'm going to keep rolling. I didn't want to stop reading. Like, it wasn't going to stop me from reading it. It read smoothly. And I didn't want to stop reading, but I also thought I should tell you. So, okay, let me find my rhythm again. The little bug would be dead by dawn. Oh my gosh, that's so sad. I'm sad. Okay, the little bug would be dead by dawn. Glow bugs had incredibly short lifespans, and it made him sad when he thought about the tiny creature on his finger. Its tail would glow in the darkness for a short while before the light would dim and its life cycle would end. It's not fair, is it? It was just a story, but Solon liked stories, and the little bug didn't seem to be in any hurry to join its friends floating about in the sky. Maybe it was as lonely as Solon felt. He could sense his mother's gaze from the doorway, filled with worry and guilt like wisps of smoke in the night. They hadn't spoken much since the council meeting. He had so many questions for her. He'd been angry, of course. Lies, no matter their purpose, always cut like a double-edged blade. Learning that his father was alive and not dead, as Solon had always believed, was still hard to grasp, even with the genetic test results in hand, especially since his father was someone he had always admired and considered a hero. Their talk had lasted well into the night, and despite all of her promises of transparency, there had still been some things that she couldn't fully reveal to him. Her footfalls were as soft as ash fall and just as quiet. The little glow bug didn't seem bothered, but it did turn to look at the intruder on their story time. Does he like stories too? She asked gently. Solon didn't reply beyond a soft shrug. He knew his mother was worried about him, but he wasn't being distant to hurt her feelings. He just didn't know what to say. Solon, it's all right to be angry with me. He could hear the sadness in his mother's voice, and it didn't belong there, but he was unsure of what to do about it. He couldn't help how he felt. In order not to startle his companion, he made sure to stay still and speak in a quiet tone. I'm not angry with you. I think I would tuck this dialogue up here at the end of this paragraph, because now we're having interaction between Solon and his mother. And if it's clear we're with them in the paragraph, it's okay to put the text at the end of it. We're going to keep going. She seemed surprised by his response. You're far more forgiving than most in your boots might be. He shrugged, not committing to any answer other than that, and she huffed out a sigh. I think you need a period right there. I'm sorry, Solon. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times. Only 1,000? No, I just stopped counting after 1,000, she added lightly, hoping to coax a chuckle or a smirk out of him. Anything. Her dry wit seemed to work as in so many past hardships, and though she couldn't see his smile, she took note of the way his cheek puffed up slightly, giving away his amusement. I love that. Very nice. Very subtle. I like it. It's a long sentence. You could make it two somewhere in there, but I like the visual that it gives. We're going to want a period right here after mom. And yeah, we're going to keep going. It's okay, Mom. It wasn't entirely a lie, but how could he be angry at his mother? Nothing that had happened was her fault. He wanted to be angry at something, but anger was a dangerous path. So rather than acting on it, he was trying something most Jedi struggle with. He tried to accept it and make peace with it. Do you understand why my deceit was necessary then? It wouldn't have been shocking if he moved away from her when she sat down next to him, but instead he surprised her once more. Slowly he lifted his hand and presented it to her as if introducing his little glowing bug friend. "It wasn't safe," he replied. "It wasn't safe," she confirmed, holding out her finger, but the bug seemed content where it was. "I wanted to tell you so many times, Solon, the truth about your father. You deserve better than tall tales." She sounded so sad at the admission, and Solon finally looked up to his mother. "I wish I could have thought of better stories." "They were really good stories, Mom." Her smile began to soothe the ache in his chest, and he slowly sat up and leaned his head against her shoulder. They sat together, the three of them, for a few minutes as the sky continued to fade into twilight. "Do you think it was a mistake to come back to Coruscant?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. She took a moment to consider her response before answering. "No, Solon," she replied with enough certainty for the both of them. "Meeting with the council was crucial. They and your father deserve to know the truth, no matter what the council decides. This is where we needed to begin." Solon bit the inside of his cheek again, as he often did when he wasn't sure if he should speak his mind. "Do you—" He paused, looking at the ground. "Do you think he's mad at me?" She blinked in confusion. "Who, Master Windu?" He shook his head. "No, Father—" He paused, and his face scrunched up in trepidation. "Master Kenobi." She shook her head in utter bewilderment. "No, why would he be mad at you?" Solon offered no words, not even a shrug, just the childlike tendency to blame themselves when things were difficult. Why am I struggling over that? Why am I struggling over this sentence? Let's look. Just the childlike tendency to blame themselves when things were difficult. Okay. I understand what it says. What is not working? Why? Is it my brain? Solon offered no words, not even a shrug. Just the childlike tendency. Okay. Okay. So I'm assuming we're with Solon's point of view. I feel like we have been this whole time. And so I don't know if he would in his mind think of himself with a childlike tendency. We've had some things all this time and it's been working. Something about this sentence is throwing me off, and I don't have a solid explanation. Solon offered no words, not even a shrug. There was the childlike tendency to blame themselves when things were difficult. Is he blaming him? Yeah, he is blaming himself. He thinks Obi-Wan's mad at him. That almost, I guess that sentence seems to me like a thought in Cressida's mind. I think that's what it is. I think that feels like a Cressida thought that might be creeping in next to Solon's point of view. I'm not sure. Now I'm going to go back and be like, I feel like we were still with Solon, or now are we suddenly with her? No, we are clearly in his point of view. Okay. Let's just try it without that sentence. No. Why would he be mad at you? Solon offered no words, not even a shrug. I also think, I know this is her. Okay, wait. Oh, here's another thing. This dialogue should be tucked up here at the end of an interaction with her, because when it starts here and says Solon, I want to think that it's Solon speaking. But I know that it's not because of what it says. So let me just try this for a second. I'm going to reread this from here, pretending this dialogue is right up there at the end of it. And then I'm going to read this, and I'm going to omit this sentence and continue, and we're going to see if it works. She shook her head in utter bewilderment. No, why would he be mad at you? Solon offered no words, not even a shrug. If he should be mad at anyone, he should be mad at me. I'm the one who kept you from him. I think that could also be a period. And I think that read better. But that's just a suggestion, and we're going to keep going. It wasn't your fault, Mom. Okay, here's the other thing. All right, so this is Solon speaking, and now we have Solon speaking again. If you want, you could just tuck this text right at the end here into this part of this paragraph in this dialogue. Or if you wanted a pause, and that's why you set it apart, then you might want to give Solon an action implying the pause and then say it. Like maybe I feel like he might look up at his mother's eyes or something and be like, it wasn't your fault, Mom. Something to that accord. We're going to keep going. She looked contemplatively, then brushed the hair from his face. Okay, I kind of see her gazing upon him, and I would drop the ly from contemplative. She looked contemplative, then brushed the hair from his face. I kind of think this word is detracting from the cadence of the story. She gazed upon him, or she peered down at him, then brushed the hair from his face. I have this visual of her looking on him adoringly. So I think that I'm going for the softer feel, if that's what you're going for. She peered down at him. She gazed upon him, brushing the hair from his face. Something to that sort. I really see her looking at him adoringly. She looked contemplative, then brushed the hair from his face, seeing an opportunity for a quick lesson, then held out a finger once more, and this time the little bug seemed to trust her enough to wander from Solon to his mother. Also, the really long sentence. I'm looking for a break there, too. She gazed upon him, then brushed the hair from his face. Period. Seeing an opportunity for a quick lesson, she held out a finger once more, and this time the little bug seemed to trust her enough to wander from Solon to his mother. That's my suggestion. We're going to keep going. Well, if it's not my fault, and it's not your fault, then who's to blame? No one, Solon offered unsurely. She tapped his nose. That's right. There's no blame here, Solon. She's using his name quite a bit, and we've talked about that, and I think even in the Star Wars world, we wouldn't repeat our name every or so much. I would probably take that out. She tapped his nose. That's right. There's no blame here. Cressida let the little bug wander back to Solon, but it seemed to finally take a liking to her, and it remained on her finger, its light glowing a little warmer. We've been two peas in a pod for a long time, you and I. Period. It's going to take some getting used to, but we are exactly where we are meant to be, she murmured. Don't you think? He was about to answer when he realized his mother wasn't talking to him, but rather to the glow bug. It twirled in small, silly circles. A smile tugged at the corners of Solon's lips as he watched, feeling the weight of guilt lift from his chest with each spin. Why isn't he flying off with the others? They both looked up at the darkening sky, where a dozen other glow bugs began to light up and flutter away. She turned her attention back to the bug in front of her, noticing its delicate wings against the bright green sheen of its body. Then she saw it. I think his wing is damaged. Maybe he can't fly. Solon looked crestfallen, and the little bug walked from her finger back to his. What's going to happen to him? The answer was simple, and he wasn't sure why he was asking, but his mother was as smart as she was kind, and she smiled. He'll join his friends when he's ready. In the meantime, I think he likes your company. What stories were you telling him? The shadow dance. That's a good story. Maybe he'd like another. Solon smiled. We need some punctuation right there. How about the Guardians of Coruscant? He nodded and curled into his mother's embrace, the little bug snuggling into Solon's palm as Cressida began to do what she did best whenever Solon was troubled, telling him stories, her specialty. We have another break. In the indiscernible time between day and night, Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Yoda made their way to an era of the temple few ever saw. A strikingly cold place within the walls of the Order in the northwestern spire, the Tower of First Knowledge. Though it stood tall, reaching into the sky with the other council spires, there was an undeniable chill that permeated through the stone walls and corridors, giving it an eerie atmosphere reminiscent of a long-forgotten dungeon instead of a tower. Okay. That is a really long sentence. Wow. Okay, all right. Let's try to break it up really. Let's see. Though it stood tall, reaching into the sky with the other council spires, there was an undeniable chill that permeated through the stone walls. Period. Or stone walls and corridors, period. Maybe. Maybe. Let's try this. Though it stood tall, reaching into the center with the other council spires, there was an undeniable chill that permeated through the stone walls and corridors. Period. It held an eerie atmosphere reminiscent of a long-forgotten dungeon instead of a tower. There we go. The Jedi were not a superstitious group by any means, but it was widely known that unless a Jedi had matters that required a trip to the northwestern spire, most avoided it entirely. As soon as Obi-Wan stepped inside, he felt an immediate sense of unease and scrutiny. Period. He felt watched. Yeah, I feel like this is like a statement, and we want to kind of emphasize it, so I put a period right here. Even Mace, usually unaffected and unflappable, seemed a bit more on edge. Dimmed lighting cast elongated shadows across the room that seemed to reach for them, and slight breezes blew from unknown sources, like it was pushing them closer to the center of the room. I'm going to stop myself before I go on because I want to keep going. I was able to read it, but I did start to think, oh, this is a little bit long too. Dimmed lighting cast elongated shadows across the room that seemed to reach for them in slight breeze. Yeah, I'd put a period here. And then I'd take out the and capitalize the S, and we're going to try to read it as though that's what it says. Dimmed lighting cast elongated shadows across the room that seemed to reach for them. Slight breezes blew from unknown sources like it was pushing them closer to the center of the room. The space was both austere and devoid of furniture or adornments, suggesting it was designated solely for conducting serious and confidential matters. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions and decisions that shaped the fate of the Jedi Order as an unseen hand often at play. This was a place steeped in hidden knowledge, where the truth often remained shrouded in mystery, and nothing was as it seemed. The three men exchanged glances, silently wondering about the Council of First Knowledge member that they were about to meet. I'm pausing for a second. I'm playing back here. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions and decisions that shaped the fate. Oh my gosh. That scared me. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions and decisions that shaped the fate of the Jedi Order as an unseen hand at play. It's a little bit. I think it's beautiful, and a bit. You might be doing something that I do, and I get into the beautiful imagery, and I get really caught up in it, and then I find myself with really long sentences. And I always hate it because the solution is to take stuff out, and it's really hard to do when you love it. Let's see. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions and decisions that shaped the fate of the Jedi Order. Period. Yeah. I love that they're an unseen hand often at play. But I think the sentence is going to read just fine the paragraph's going to read better without it. But I do like what you're saying. Let's just try it without it. Oh, the air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions and decisions that shaped the fate of the Jedi Order. This was a place steeped in hidden knowledge, where the truth often remained shrouded in mystery, and nothing was as it seemed. You know what? The other thing two other things. I'm tripping over discussions and decisions because they both have IONS sounds, these SIONS sounds at the end. And so I'm tripping over those when I say them. You could probably omit either the discussions, use one or the other. And I think your sentence is still going to work, whichever one you pick. And the other thing is, I think you can still keep there an unseen hand at play by just saying, what were they called? What were they called again? Restate the name of the people, the council. Say, the Council of First Knowledge was an unseen hand at play, or the council was This council, this particular council, was an unseen hand often at play. Let's just taste all of this. The air seemed to whisper ancient secrets, having witnessed countless discussions that shaped the fate of the Jedi Order. This council was an unseen hand often at play. This was a place steeped in hidden knowledge, where the truth often remained shrouded in mystery, and nothing was as it seemed. I don't know. See what you think. Fool with it. Don't fool with it. Whatever. We're going to keep going. The three men exchanged glances, silently wondering about the Council of First Knowledge member they were about to meet. They weren't, so they're only going to meet one person. Because I'm kind of thinking, well, when I think council, I'm thinking of the whole collaborative group. So they're only having a meeting with a specific person. Anyway, that's my thoughts. We're going to keep going. They weren't a particularly social bunch. Now, if we are talking about a group of people, I would take the word member out because the council implies a group. So let's try it without that, because the next sentence kind of makes me think it is a group. Okay, we're just going to go with that. The three men exchanged glances, silently wondering about the Council of First Knowledge they were about to meet. They weren't a particularly social bunch, and there was some question as to who exactly they were meant to be meeting. Despite the stable light source, shadows suddenly flickered and an undeniable shift in the atmosphere occurred. The temperature grew colder, and a heightened tension filled the room, as if a mysterious presence had entered the chamber. My apologies, masters, for my tardiness. A smooth voice broke the silence. It held the same quality of a serpent's hiss, causing all masters to snap their heads to the source. Draped in robes that were unusually dark, blending in seamlessly with the surrounding shadows, she emerged. Her movements were swift and almost otherworldly, as if her feet barely touched the ground. I am Nuxella, and I speak for the Council of First Knowledge. I have been observing you. Her last statement was a bit chilling. When the details of her features were distinguishable, Obi-Wan found himself greatly surprised. Nuxella was a Zephonian. The Zephonians, or Zephos, had long been thought to be extinct, as they hadn't been seen in the galaxy for centuries. He recalled the stories he had heard about the ancient and reclusive species with deep ties to the Force, known for their mastery of secrets and enigmatic abilities. It seemed almost appropriate that one of her kind would serve on the Council of First Knowledge, and even more so that no one would be any the wiser. You seek information concerning the Sentinel Mother, Cressida Vox? Nuxella stated, her words uttered in a tone that revealed little. The Sentinel Mother? Obi-Wan asked, his curiosity piqued by the unfamiliar title. Nuxella nodded. Indeed, she replied, her voice low and mysterious. The Sentinels are a close-knit group, and news travels swiftly among us, as so nicknames. As do nicknames, maybe? Yes, as do nicknames. Obi-Wan felt a sense of unease, as if he was being studied. He had encountered many Jedi Masters and Council members, but this woman radiated an aura of power that was both intriguing and, if he was being honest, a bit disturbing. He exchanged a glance with Mace and Yoda, both of whom appeared equally intrigued and cautious. Vital this information is, Yoda said firmly, but in a voice that conveyed the respect Nuxella commanded, to assess Cressida's actions and guide the young one Solin's path. Nuxella's response was cryptic, almost riddle-like. Secrets are the foundations of knowledge, and knowledge is the path to understanding. Her words dripping with a quiet sibilant timbre. Cressida Vox's mission was cloaked in secrecy, with only the faintest whispers of her deeds known to a select few. We seek the truth, Yoda said gently, and the Council of First Knowledge holds the answers. You seek truth, but truth can be a double-edged blade. The Sentinel's tale is one of sacrifice and trials, a constant struggle with the darkness and light. Some truths are best left uncovered, but others demand illumination. You understand I will not be able to give you all the answers you seek. Yoda nodded. Sorry, I'm thinking back here. It's reading really well, but I think these could be short. These could literally be, some of these could be sent just like sentences, I feel like. Maybe. Some truths are best left uncovered, but others demand illumination. No, it's fine. I don't know. I think that was me. I think it's me. I think it's beautiful, actually. Like, maybe I'm getting really caught up in it. I'm kind of feeling I feel the presence of Noxella in this scene, and so there's a tension growing now. Like she has brought attention to this room, and I feel it like it's just kind of like spilled over them like ink or something. It's kind of a little bit heavy. There's an energy about her character, and so I'm kind of getting distracted by that. Let me try to focus. I'm getting caught up in your story. Okay. Anyway, Yoda nodded. Noxella considered this, her dark eyes piercing through them. Very well, but understand that once the door to knowledge is opened, there is no turning back. Noxella continued, her voice dark and heavy. Cressida Vox operated under an assumed identity, was assigned to an undisclosed... I kind of want this to be operating. Maybe. And because Noxella has such a presence, I don't know. She has a heavy presence already. So I kind of want you to kind of like be subtle here. Let's just try it. Noxella continued, her voice dark. What is the timbre of her voice? What does it sound like? I kind of want something that says this in one word. That's what I'm aiming for. I'm going to pick one of the two words and you toy with it or think about it however you want or don't, whatever. But I'm trying to be true to the cadence of your story and the sensation and the tension that's building here. So Noxella continued, her voice dark. Her voice heavy. Let's go with heavy and take out the dark. I feel like we need one adjective here or one word that says both. Noxella continued, her voice heavy. Cressida Vox, operating under an assumed identity, was assigned to an undisclosed world on the outer rim. The specifics of the planet and her mission are considered highly sensitive. The finality of her tone left no room for negotiation in this part of the story. She was cut off from the Jedi Order to maintain her cover and protect her mission's integrity. Mace's eyes focused on Noxella, narrowing slightly. He wasn't a big fan of being told no. And during these 10 years, did she ever reach out for assistance or guidance? I'm pausing because I'm wondering, Cressida is out on this really secretive mission. Obviously, we immediately as the reader want to know more about the mission. But I'm also wondering how Cressida navigated being pregnant and having a baby while on this mission, which it sounds like she went through with whatever the mission was. That's kind of what's toying around in my reader brain. We're going to keep going. So, and I'm going to try to read it again and be focused. Mace's eyes focused on Noxella, narrowing slightly. He wasn't a fan of being told no. And during these 10 years, did she ever reach out for assistance or guidance? Noxella's lips quirk into an almost imperceptible smile. Cressida was trained and prepared for her assignment. She was expected to handle any and all threats that arose on her own. The mission demanded secrecy and independence. Novella paused and replied, No. Aside from her routine communications, she had no contact with us. I almost want no to be... I almost want no to be a statement, I think. A statement. Let's just try it again. Novella paused and replied, No. Aside from her routine communications, she had no contact with us. How often were these routine communications? Obi-Wan asked, a little confused. Once every 10 years. Noxella's response was curt. The Council of First Knowledge deemed that any direct communication with the Jedi Order could jeopardize her mission. Obi-Wan's heart sank as he contemplated the loneliness and isolation that Cressida had endured, all for the sake of her mission. Mace sighed, frustration evident in his voice. Master Noxella, we understand that you may not be at liberty to share all the details of Cressida's mission, but we need to know if she faced any threats that could have affected her judgment or her standing in the light. Most certainly, she looked from one master to the other, landing on Obi-Wan. But her dedication to the mission and her training allowed her to navigate these obstacles with strength and fortitude. Obi-Wan took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation as he asked, Noxella, did the Council of First Knowledge know about Solon? Noxella's previously composed demeanor faltered for a moment, her eyes flickering with a hint of surprise. She hesitated before responding. No, the existence of Solon was kept even from us.
I must stress to you, Master Kenobi, that very few know the exact circumstances surrounding his birth. Obi-Wan processed her answer, trying to make sense of the information. So you were not aware of his existence at all? No, Noxella responded firmly, possibly with a hint of annoyance at being asked the same question more than once. Obi-Wan's mind raced with questions, but he could sense that Noxella was not willing to divulge more than she had. But he decided to probe a bit further. Okay, so you've got two buts in the same sentence. This is my suggestion. I would put a period here and say, still, he decided to probe a bit further. Let's just taste it. Obi-Wan's mind raced with questions, but he could sense that Noxella was not willing to divulge more than she had. Still, he decided to probe a bit further. If her assignment was so vital, how was she able to return? Noxella hesitated for a moment before responding. Solon's unique abilities in the Force became increasingly difficult to conceal as his visions and powers grew stronger, and the risk of their identities being discovered increased. Mace leaned forward, intrigued by this revelation. Solon's abilities were a threat to Cressida's mission? Noxella nodded. Yes, Cressida was on the verge of being compromised, and it was decided that the safety of both Cressida and her son necessitated their immediate extraction. The Council, with the aid of the Sentinels and Shadows, orchestrated their return, ensuring their identities remained intact. Obi-Wan stroked his beard and gazed at the pot on the ground, taking a moment to collect his thoughts before speaking. His thirst for knowledge overcame him, and before he could stop himself, the inquiry tumbled out. What happened during those 10 years? It was foolish to expect an answer. He knew that. At best, he could get a cryptic response, but despite the certainty of being proven right, he couldn't shake the feeling that Noxella understood, and just for a moment there was a flash of empathy in her eyes. That's a really long sentence. You could probably find a break in it. I was able to read it. Take it for what you will. I cannot say, but it is perhaps in your best interest, Master Jedi, to remain ignorant of the full extent of her deeds and the threats she faced. They will bring you no peace. Mace seized the moment to interject, his tone reflecting his tactical mindset and warrior's instincts. I hesitated because I almost wanted this to be this. I think it's fine with but my brain kind of put in this, and then it disrupted I like the way you have it. My brain interjected a different word, and it made me stumble over the sentence. So let me try it again. Mace seized the moment to interject, his tone reflecting his tactical mindset and warrior's instincts. You mentioned threats. What kind of dangers did she face? Noxella's response was evasive yet again, albeit a bit snappy. I cannot provide specifics, but I assure you that her mission demanded a rare combination of bravery and resilience, qualities found only among the elite members of her Sentinel brethren. The room was silent except for the gentle sound of Noxella's robes brushing against the ground as she moved away. She seemed ready to vanish into the darkness from whence she came. Obi-Wan stood there, his eyes never leaving her slowly retreating form. On this subject, I'm afraid we have exhausted the topic, and I can reveal no more to you, aside from saying that Cressida Vox is a high-priority agent of the Council of First Knowledge, and she has proven herself indispensable to the Order. Noxella's gaze softened, and she gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. She served faithfully, she added, and has endured deep wounds both of her body and the spirit. Her sacrifices should not be discounted. Her words held sharp edge as if they were less of a statement and more of a warning, and she looked between Mace and Yoda. Remember, Masters, that while you sit on your thrones in the council chamber, the Sentinels are the ones who stand guard in the shadows. They sacrifice their peace for the sake of your sleep. Then that same gaze fell on Obi-Wan, and her voice took on a more pointed tone. You are fortunate to have such a woman as the mother to your child. The room fell into silence again, with Mace, Obi-Wan, and Yoda exchanging glances. When they turned back, Noxella was nowhere to be seen, leaving behind an air of intrigue. Mace subtly shook his head, feeling unsettled by the Council of First Knowledge's elusive nature. I've never been comfortable dealing with the Council of First Knowledge, Mace admitted. That's almost funny at this point. Almost like, I never have been sure about them. Okay. Yoda clutched his cane thoughtfully, his wise eyes gazing into the distance. A secretive sect they are indeed, he said. Many truths they may hold, but always shrouded in shadow they remain. grateful for what we were given we should be. Wow. 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 Oh, and I get a thank you note at the end. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing this really awesome story with me. I enjoy it so much. I love reading for you guys. Thank you to you, the Great Wicked, and thank everyone who trusts me with their words. Um, this has been a pleasure. And oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, and I got a thank you note. I'm so okay. My day is made. I hope you guys have a great day too. And I will see you guys next time on When Mystery Red Reads.